Hello everyone, this is Kevin. We're bringing you a battle report on the Age of Sigmar. This is Bretonnians versus the Undead. Now, real quick, this battle took place on Sunday following the weekend release of Age of Sigmar, the rule set from Games Workshop's website. And kind of like everybody else, as soon as I found out that New Zealand had their rules posted up, I went to the website, downloaded all of the armies, the army rule set and the scenario, and I read, first I read the army book rules, or I read the rule set for the game system, and then I read my favorite armies being Bretonnian, dwarves, lizardmen, and then I went and I read the armies on the most popular units that I tend to face, the high elves, the wizards of chaos, and I guess who else, demons. And so, that said, I was very excited to play on Sunday. My first overall pass of reading all the rules is everything was more on par. Kind of almost like the same feel that we had with Ravaging Hordes when Games Workshop in 5th edition realized that they had a very unbalanced game system back in the 5th edition when we used to call it Hero Hammer. And so, Ravaging Horde came out and they rewrote all of the rules and made everything more balanced. And that's kind of what I felt right here. I think everything was more on par with each other. There was reasons to take units, where in the past there was absolutely no reason to take it. Now they were actually viable. They had some certain tricks that made them worthwhile. And in addition to, now units, that were always, the reason, it didn't take away from the fact that the units that were always the ones you want to take were still actually pretty good. But now you could actually try something different if you got bored of playing a particular unit. And I also felt that the armies themselves were much more even. The heroes weren't so diverse, meaning that you have overpowering vampire lords that your human Bretonnians have absolutely no chance of beating in combat, and that's not the case anymore. Now you have everything is pretty much killable, and it almost reminds me a lot of Chronopia. Now, I don't know if any of you guys played Chronopia, but it was probably one of the best game systems that was ever developed. Great line of miniatures. I think Kev White was one of the main sculptors for the armies, and they had some excellent artwork and a great game system. It's just the company went under, and but you could see some reminiscence of that feel based on how the scrimmage-based game moves, some of the rules, and the fact that nothing was overpowering. Everything dies in this game, and I kind of like that because that means that you just can't put things out there and expect that they're going to take care of themselves and they're unkillable. Now everything's going to die. So I was excited. But one thing is my perspective of you could take any unit and any army did change after this game, and I'll talk a little bit about it at the end. I also plan to have another video where I just talk about Age of Sigmar and my personal experience playing the game and where I'm at in the hobby. With that said, let me move on to the game. So this is my opponent doing his Vanna White impersonation. To be honest, I don't recall why he was showing me his miniature. I think I told him I was a YouTuber and I wanted to record the battle report and if I was going to take pictures, and I think he misunderstood me and just was showing me his miniatures. But anyhow, I thought it's hilarious. I can't recall why I'm taking this picture. So when I got to my local game store, most people had already beat us on some of the choice tables, so we got a very small corner. And for me, that was perfect because I didn't want to play a full large scale game. I wanted to play half the size as a regular game. I felt, and it has been confirmed that this is a scrimmage-based game, and you really don't need a lot of models to play this game. And so I wanted a very small, game size, so that I could just get a feel for the rules and not worry too much about moving models. But that said, I had no idea what the point start should have been. I don't know any way to balance it out. Now, I know that the way it works is your opponent's supposed to throw on the table what he feels like playing, and you put what you feel like playing. and then you play. And so, and then based on who has the advantage at the start of the game, you go to sudden death, which I think everybody agrees is probably the worst way to handle this. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the game. So we're looking around and we're noticing that everybody is playing what looks to be Warhammer. Everybody's ranked up in regular block formation. They're playing it. You couldn't tell if you look at the tabletop that they were playing 8th edition or Age of Sigmar. They essentially had the huge blocks, and they had a variety of units. They didn't have the standard Death Star units that you take, and you saw a lot of monsters. But they were taking up the 4x6 tables, and so I asked around what size they were using, how many wounds they were using, and they were using about 200. So my opponent and I decided to go with 100 wound counts, and we put an arbitrary limit of 6 war scrolls, because we've heard some people talk about limiting war scrolls. And so my opponent then chose, noticed that one of the battle scrolls happened to have 6 units, or 6 war scrolls. So he chose to run the Death Rattle Horde battle scroll, and essentially it, you see the organization and what he has to take, and some of the attributes. One of them is rerolling ones, and that ended up being quite advantageous, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And then he has the rest of the units out here. 3 units of skeletons. It didn't say how big they have to be, so he blocked them up in sizes of 30. He put a unit of 10 grave guards and 10 black knights. Now, I didn't have enough models, so for me to follow the 6 war scrolls formation, I didn't have enough. The only one I could have followed was peasant knights, but I've never really believed in peasant knights in a knight army, so I don't really have a lot of peasants, with the exception of a few archers. And so, I chose just to go with the standard author 6 models, 6 war scrolls out there, and fill up the ranks. And so what I end up having to do is I actually literally put, thinking that I'm playing half the size of a regular game by using a 100 wound count, I end up putting all of the models that I have for the Bretonnian armies, and I'm realizing that I'm not playing a small scale battle here. It ends up being probably maybe about a 2,000 point battle equivalent. I'm thinking, because that's how many models I'm putting out on the tabletop. And so you'll notice though that I have 7 war scrolls. To get to 100 wounds, I was about 10 models short, even after me running out of my knights. And so I put down a unit of 14 bowmen, and I'm running with a lady of the lake, or a damsel, I mean, and a lord. So this shot is right after deployment, but right before the first turn. We don't roll off anymore. The way Age of Sigmar works now is whoever finishes deploying first gets the first turn automatically, and then you roll off thereafter. And so I deploy first. I finish deploying first, and I get the first turn. On top of that, with the rules of sudden death, my opponent has more than twice as many models than I do. Even though we have the same exact wound count, he has more models on the table than I do. So I get the sudden death option, and I choose the easy one, which is kill a unit that's 5 or more, that has 5 models or more in it, to win the sudden death victory. And so there we go. And so the shot that you see here now is my yeomen making their free move. Since they've gotten rid of the fast cav rules, and they've also gotten rid of Vanguard and Scouting, the way they handle this now is every unit has special rules assigned to it. So you don't have kind of like all cavalries do this. You have to read the rules for every single war scroll, because they have different rules for each one of them. In this case, the yeomen are pretty much fully upgraded yeomen in the old Bretonnian rulebook. And in addition to that, instead of them being fast cav, they are scouts, which gives them 1 free movement. And so I'll go ahead and get my free movement before the game even starts. I do what Bretonnians do on my first turn. I charge, and the way charging works here is you move first, and then you charge. So what you see here is, in my movement phase, I move everybody up as much as I can, and I make it to almost everybody within 3 inches, right? So you move as much as you can, can't get any closer than 3 inches. And so what you see here is my scouts, or my yeomen, move behind the skellies. My knights errants move. No, they're not knight errants. Those are I'm proxying a few models, so they're actually questing knights, and they move up to the unit on the left, the skellies on the left. The middle ones are Grail Knights, and they advance up forward to the Black Knights. And my hero advances between the Black Knights and the Realm Knights. And I advance my my bowman up, and I move back my lady, who is dressed as a Arab sheik. And so, you know, one thing is, when I moved my yeoman behind the skellies, my opponent, he makes a comment saying that there's no more rear charges, no more flank charges. I have no advantage in moving behind. And I tell him, you know, I don't say anything, but I'm thinking, yes, there is. I played skirmish-based games, and the advantage is I'm going to be able to put more models in base-to-base contact with you, which means I'm going to get more attacks. And that's kind of the strategy that I'm going here. I'm trying to get as many models on his flank so that I can get as many more attacks on him than he gets on me. Now, the reason why I have the red arrows is because at 3 inches, I make every single one of my charges, and the cavalries have the ability to reroll failed charges, but I don't need to do any of that. Actually, it's not cavalry that gets that. It's that if you have a musician, then you get to reroll failed charges. And on top of that, for my special hero action, I choose to allow anybody within 6 inches to reroll failed charges. In the first turn of combat, the first unit I decide to activate is my Grail Knights, and they kill all of his Black Knights to the man. Now, if you recall, the sudden death scenario was for me to pick a unit to kill to the man, and that was the Black Knights. So here we are in the first turn, the first combat, and I've already won the game. And I'm thinking, this is just ridiculous. This is not fun. It's not balanced. You know, it's just not, I don't think that's a great mechanism. And I haven't met a person yet who thought that was a great mechanism to compensate for the lack of balance or the lack of good design. So I think Games Workshop needs to work on a better way to balance out the games to make it more tactical. So, you know, we say, hey, you know, we're both here to learn, so we don't want to end the game in turn one. So I pick a different scenario. I pick the sudden death where I have to have my character live for 6 turns. And so I pick my damsel to live for 6 turns to win. Truth be said, I don't even feel that's right, but whatever. And so here we go on. And so he then turns around, and my opponent already has had several games and, you know, more than me. And so he's already understanding the movement. And this is one of the subtleties of Age of Sigmar that I didn't get. And I'm used to the only people that could attack back are the people that are touching you in base combat. But my opponent is wiser. And I'm thinking he's going to activate his units that are in my questing knights, or the units that are in front of my Knights of the Realm. But he doesn't. He activates the unit that's next to them and puts them into base contact. And I think, oh, that's so brilliant. And I didn't even see that coming. Now he has 2 units of skeletons all attacking my Knight's Realm, and I'm in a lot of trouble. So you'll notice that I've changed the notation of activation. So essentially, the way I'm going to annotate the activation, as opposed to showing lines, is it's going to be a square with the initial of the army followed by a colon and then the sequence in which they're activated. What you're going to find out is it's very busy in Age of Sigmar as far as how they get activated. So no more lines, only if it makes a difference in the visual or helps out. But here what happens is my questing knights get activated, and they obliterate his unit of skeletons. With my riders doing 2 attacks, and they do rending with a -1, and the horses get 2 attacks, no rend there. They absolutely obliterate the unit. Now, my opponent has a special rule. He essentially has a 6 save, but he'll get a 4+ save with the shield and some bonus if he's being attacked by a model that doesn't have rending. And if I do have rending, then he automatically loses his armor. So he's either getting great saves from my units that have no rending, or he's getting no saves at all. In this particular case, he gets no saves from my questing knights. So this is the end of Bretonnian turn, and so you can see it's quite busy. And so all I do is kind of annotate the sequence in which the units are activated. Now, we're all within 3 inches of combat here, so everything pretty much gets activated with the exception of the unit that he's pointing at. And so the way it works is, after my questing knights kind of obliterate his skeletons, he activates his skeletons in black against my realm knights, and just continues to pound on them. So they're the ones that are taking all the casualties. But they're also the ones that have taken 2 full attacks between 2 different units. So now, then I activate my mounted yeoman, and my thought is I want to get him away, or get them away from his hero that's 3 inches away. So if I could get away from his hero, I'll have another round of attack where he doesn't get to attack, right? And if not, he's going to get to move his hero and engage me in combat. And so my mounted yeoman charge his remaining skeletons that are fighting the questing knights, and they do no damage. What I'm finding out is that the mounted yeomen really don't do that much damage. They don't have the rending, so my opponent's getting the 4+ armor save, and they don't hit very well, and they don't, they're hitting on 5s and wounding on 4s with no rending. The horses are actually a little bit better than the mounted yeomen. But what they do well, now he turns around and he charges his White King against my mounted yeoman, and I think I take 1 wound. So they're good at taking damage or absorbing wounds, not really good at combat. So I end up tying his hero for a good while, and it takes him a while to weather them down, which is a good use. Vampire count turn 1. This is a shot right before he starts activating anything. Now, since he doesn't have magic or shooting, he essentially goes straight into movement and then combat. So I mentioned before, my opponent doesn't have magic or shooting, and so to top it off, the only unit he has that can move is his Graveguard. So essentially what he does is he moves his Graveguard up 3 inches to my Grail Knights. He then charges my Grail Knights and then activates them first. And so he does 1 wound of damage to my Grail Knights. My Grail Knights turn around and do about maybe 4 wounds on him as well. But one thing I didn't mention is his Graveguard also benefit for the +1 on rerolls, and they're hitting on 3, so they actually did a lot of wounds. What's saving me here in this game is that I'm rolling armor saves like you wouldn't believe, and he doesn't have rending on most of his troop types, so I'm getting the 4-up armor save, and it's really helping me out. Also, by the way, I should mention it now, I completely forgot to use the Grail Knights reroll, and so for the whole game, not once did I use their reroll ability. So after that, he then turns around and activates his white king, and he's trying to get rid of my squire so that he could turn around and help out his tomb guard. And I think he does maybe 1 or 2 wounds of damage. So I'm liking him because I'm liking these mounted yeomen simply because they're great. They have a lot of movement, and while they don't do a lot of damage on the table, they actually do engage and detain. Now, of course, my opponent could have rolled really well and wiped him out, but he was doing pretty much average, and so they're doing pretty good in holding him up. But I still panic, and I want to get these grave guards out of the way. Essentially, what I'm realizing is my Realm Knights are in a lot of trouble, and he has 2 full units on my flank. And if I don't get these grave guards out of the way, I won't be able to use my Grail Knights to support my Realm Knights, right? And so essentially, it comes down to I got to get rid of these grave guards soon so that I could turn around on my turn and charge into his other skeletons and save my Realm Knights, and also to protect my flank. So what I do is I put my questing knights and move them up into his grave guard, and they destroy his unit. And I'm reassessing it, and I'm realizing, in the beginning I said that I thought all units were pretty much on par, and that each one of them had their advantages and their reason to take. And right now, I'm starting to favor these questing knights. They didn't have great armor saves in 6th, 7th, and 8th edition, but in Age of Sigmar, their save is as good as any other knight, and they consistently do the damage. Their only one downside is they don't have the rerolls like the Grail Knights, and they only have a 1-inch range for fighting, whereas Grail Knights have 2 on the charge. So, but nonetheless, these guys are pulling the weight. So this is a picture of the activity that happens on the right flank. And his skeletons are really going after my Realm Knights. And, one thing that I would say is I really like this whole battle scroll setup. His Wraith Knight isn't that great of a combat character, but he's tough to kill, and he gives his whole army a 1+ reroll. On top of that, they get a +1 to hit. And so, and then on top of that, the skeletons, if they have more than 20 models in their unit, they get 2 attacks. So he's pumping a lot of attacks. He's putting in 80 attacks on this unit of knights. He really should have wiped them out right here. But what happens is he's rolling slightly below average on his to hit and to wound, but I'm rolling really, really above average for saving my wounds. And so I'm doing a good job in not dying here, I guess. And the one thing I'm also doing is I'm also giving them the +1 armor save so that they're not dying as quick. So my 4+ armor save is going to a 3+. This is one of the new rules that I really like about Age of Sigmar. I like the fact that after the first turn, you dice off every single time. Here I win the roll off, but I never really liked the old mechanic of previous Warhammer, where you dice off at the beginning of the game, and whoever won that dice off had the advantage for the rest of the game. And for some armies that was real important, and some other armies, not so, but still having that advantage. And here, every single time the turn ends, you get a chance, an opportunity to go back to back, or even just to go first, right? And I really like that about the new rules. I think it's exciting. I think it adds some level of strategy or risk. I always found it odd that for everything you have to roll, but except for the turn, it didn't make any sense to me. So anyways, I like this aspect of the game. And so here you see that we dice off. I roll just 1 point higher, but that's enough for me to win the roll off. So I kind of got into the game and forgot to take any more pictures of turn 2. And so this is pretty much the picture I took. And this is right at the top of my combat phase. And so you see that I activated my my questing knights. And I made a tactical blunder here. And it's something I didn't catch on here, but I will catch it later on. I'm concerned about my left flank. He has 2 units of full health skeletons. They double the attacks, or essentially he's pumping in 30 attacks per unit, and then he's getting that +1 to hit, and then rerolls once. So I'm just getting really lucky he hasn't wiped me out yet. But I know that my luck's about to run out. And so I make a tactical blunder, and this is something I correct later on. I activate my questing knights to get rid of his grave guard. And what I should have done is, and the reason for that is, now that they're free, I could then now move my questing knight, my grail knights, to go help out my my realm knights and my lord. But what I really should have done is gotten rid of his hero. It's his hero that's making those skeleton units so darn tough. And so I catch that later on, but here I still make the mistake of activating them second, which what means then is that my questing knights don't get to turn around and attack his hero. They just sit there and do nothing. So here you'll notice that my realm knights are gone. They lost enough wounds that that they were taken down to only a few wounds left, and then in the battle scroll they end up getting wiped out and losing all of their models. And so my opponent, I think he's been outplaying me this whole game, strategic wise and positioning wise, because what he does is, my intent is I'm going to move my hero over and kind of slide everybody over, but he advances his skeletons to block that shift, and he does it in a way where I realize, oh darn it, in my previous turn I should have moved them over then, so that he couldn't have done the shuffle on me, and then I would have been able to maximize my models. Instead, he's blocked me and denied me that, and I think that's just brilliant on my characters and my opponent's strategy. So what I'm forced to do is kind of a lot of shifting and shuffling, and when I activate my Grail Knights, I have to kind of move them sideways, and kind of just get as much front coverage as I possibly can. And so we're starting to get it now. The first turn was a lot of trying to learn the rules, and now we're starting to understand the strategy of how important the sequence of unit activation is, and how your opponent could kind of thwart your plans. And so I saw when I would adjust, I also saw that I kind of thwarted some of his plans, and so it starts getting a bit strategic. And so this is part, in my opinion, the most strategic part of the game, is really how you activate them, and how you move your, the order in which you activate your units, and how you actually position your units really is going to be the key to being successful in Age of Sigmar. So this is really just a close-up of that previous shot, and I labeled the sequence of order in which it happened. So essentially, my opponent, I mentioned how he activated his skeletons first, and then I was forced to shuffle over and block any more advancement with my Grail Knights. And then he rearranged his Vampire Skellies to block any, to block my Questing Knights from getting frontal attack, and I think that's brilliant. And so that's kind of the shuffle that we play here, and you don't see it here, but this is kind of in the middle of my activation. I forget to take a final picture of the previous turn, so you'll notice that my Questing Knights were not activated, and this is when I realized I need to get his Vampire Lord or Wraith King, because I'm losing models, and I'm going to continue to lose with him alive. And so you'll see that in the next slide. So it's top at turn 3, and I win the first turn, and it's frustrating my opponent because he really wanted the first turn here. He's like, this is when he really needed the first turn, and he didn't get it, and that was huge, because what would have happened here is he probably would have activated his skeletons on my hero to kill my hero. Me getting the first turn, what I do is I realize something. I realize that when it comes to shooting, I have no penalty for long range firing into combat. You know, we're allowed to fire into combat now. There's no rules that says you can't. There's no rules that says you can't, that you have penalties against shooting at single models. So I focus all of my shooting into his hero, and I don't do one wound of damage. His armor save just is thwarting everything off. I managed to pull off 2 wounds so far in the game. My squires got 2 wounds in early on in the first turn. But after that, I've not done anything to him. He's just, you know, shaking everything off. Even on the previous turn when I moved my, questing knights, not one wound went through, and I hit him. You know, I didn't roll very well, but he shook everything off. So he's just really tough to kill. Also, one thing that I don't know if I mentioned on the previous turn, he had focused all of his skeletons, now that he didn't have the realm knights to worry about, on killing my hero, and he's gotten him down to 2 wounds left. And so I'm real nervous here. I know that I've been rolling above average for armor save, but the chances of him getting killed are pretty high. And I think that's why my opponent wanted that first turn. He wanted to regrow some of his skeletons, and he also wanted to attack my hero before I was able to make any adjustments. And that's exactly what I do. You'll see a little blue tear dot on my hero. That represents that I casted the magic. They gave him a +1 to the armor save. So now he's saving on a 2+, because he has a normal armor save of 3+. So now I'm confident that he could wither his attacks. So this is kind of the combat sequence order. This is taken right before combat was about to start. So I kind of have the sequence in which we activate it. I activate my questing knights first. I got to get rid of his Wraith King. If I get rid of him, the battle's going to turn around. His skeletons will no longer have the +1 to hit. They'll no longer have the reroll ones, and all of a sudden things will start turning around. And you can see right now they're so effective. I make a mistake here in the chart. He didn't do 3 wounds on this turn. He did it on his previous turn to show you how deadly they were. He's getting 40 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, and then he's rerolling 1s. So he's just getting a lot of attacks through. And one more of these attacks, and that my hero's dead, and as well as my Grail Knights. Oh, and I do it. I needed 3 wounds, and I just scraped off 3 wounds, killing the 0. The game turns around at this particular point. Even though he does do a lot of damage or a lot of hits on my heroes, he's not doing as many now. And he's not getting his +1 rerolls. And so all of a sudden, his skeletons that were so combat effective still are combat effective, but nowhere near as much as they were. Looking at the bottom of his turn. Please ignore that yellow line. I was confused when I was writing this diagram. But essentially, the way it works is now it's all out. What he does is he realizes my Lord isn't very combat effective. There was one turn where I got real lucky, and I did maybe 8 wounds to his black skeletons. He has a potential of killing 15, but I never get more than 2 or 3. So I've been working on the skeletons little by little. And so now he's decided to maximize his skeletons. He wants to get this kill. And so what he does is completely wraps around my hero. And you'll notice that I still have that magic spell casted on him. And again, he's doing 10 to 12 wounds on him. And I'm just saving every single wound. His skeletons are completely annihilated. With a combination of my Grail Knights, since they're so small now, they're not very effective. All the damage is done by my questing knights, who come in, charge, and they don't charge. They're within 3 inches, so they come in and completely wipe out the rest of the skeletons. At this particular point, I could tell you single-handedly, my questing knights have won the game. They've pretty much destroyed anybody they touch. This is just a close-up of the previous slide. This is a shot of Bretonnian turn 4 at the bottom of the combat phase. So in the movement phase, I move my yeoman to get in position to shoot his skellies, and I think I do a shot of volleys with my archers. I don't think I do any wound. On the magic phase, I buff up my hero again with the 1+ armor save, so he's at a 2+ armor save right now. And so during the combat phase, I activate my hero first. I'm hoping to get, maybe 7 wounds, 6 wounds. I end up only doing 2 wounds, but that ends up being still critical. What happens is, on the prior turn, he was down to 20 models. And 20 models is still enough to give him the double attacks. But now that I've taken 2 wounds off of him, he's down to 18. So he's no longer getting 2 attacks. He's no longer getting his +1 to hit. And so his skeletons are just not at that combat effective anymore. And so they do no wounds on my hero. And my Grail Knights just do a little bit of damage on his skeletons. But when I bring in my Questing Knights, they absolutely destroy his skeletons. I bring him down from 18 to 2 models left. And I don't even waste my time with the mounted yeoman attacking. From the battle shock phase, he's going to lose the rest of his models, so we just call it a game. It's a Bretonnian victory. And I think I've only lost 1 unit and a few units from the Grail Knights. I mean, a few models. So I did want to talk a little bit about my impression after playing the game and a little bit of the strategy. So I did mention that I thought that the units were on par. There's a reason to take everyone. And while I still see that you could still have fun and take models, like before, there really was no reason to take certain models. All they were doing is giving away free points to your opponent. And it was not a smart thing to do. Whereas here, you can take models if you wish to take them, and they can have some level of effectiveness. But there's definitely still units that are far better than other. An example is my Questing Knights. At this particular point, I'm always going to take Questing Knights. They're always going to give you 2 attacks. They're always going to have a rend of 2. They're hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, or 4s, I think. Hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s. They don't have the rerolls that Grail Knights have, but they're going to do that damage that you need. And they know their armor save now is on par with everyone else. So back before, in 6th, 7th, and 8th, Questing Knights always saved on the 3+, so they were never really worth taking because they attacked last and they had a 3+ armor save, so they usually got killed right away before they could even swing. Now it's based on activation, and now the armor save is probably one of the best in the game. A 4+ is a decent save now. Everything saves on a 4+. You have heroes saving on a 3+, and nothing really saving on a 2+ anymore. So now all of a sudden the playing field is a lot better, but they do more damage. The Realm Knights was a mistake to take them as small as I took them. The fact that they only had 1 attack. You'd have to take them in a larger unit than 10 to get the 2 attacks. But they're not as combat effective. They're just as strong as the Grail Knights when they charge. It's just in hand-to-hand combat they won't be. So you definitely need a Paladin to buff them up. And so I didn't have a Paladin here, so that was a mistake to take them. So I think that I still can take the Realm Knights, but I will never take Realm Knights over Questing Knights or Grail Knights. Simply because, why? They cost the same amount of points. Why take the Realm Knights when I could take somebody that's better? So I'm at the point now where I don't believe that there's an even playing field. I could take Realm Knights and not suffer, but why take them? When we started the game, my opponent looked and he said, "There's no way that I'm going to win the game." He says that this game, he was not very enthused about Age of Sigmar, although he was trying to be very optimistic and give it a fair shake. And he had already played a few more games than I had. And you know, at first I agreed with him, but after playing this game, I do feel that Vampire Counts are a finesse army. The way he played them aggressively was not probably the best thing to do. I think that if he was a bit more careful in how he deployed and how he utilized them and how he supported his troops, he would have done a lot better. Having his hero all by himself was a mistake, and that cost him the game. So I think that he could have won? Yeah, I do think that he could have won. The skeletons are not something to shake off. They're actually pretty darn good. They're better than peasants on hand-to-hand combat, and with the bonuses that his heroes were giving him, they were actually pretty scary in combat. So I do think that they are balanced out. But so as far as what else is out there, I don't know. I still have to keep on playing different armies to see if it's a balanced list or not. But anyhow, thank you for listening. This is Kelmore signing out.